All right, so I was checking out some tools and then I came across this tool, and it's a plugin which has been around for quite some time now, but then it is now being incorporated into Cinema 4D. So the name of the plugin is Ornatrix. It's used for grooming hair and all that. So I saw a tutorial online and that made me search whether I would see similar things in Cinema 4D. And luckily for me, I stumbled on it and I noticed, okay, I got to have this has now been added to Cinema 4D. So I just really want to talk about that Ornatrix. But before I go to that tutorial, I want to give this credit to this guy. This is his channel. His name is Genesis Williams. So you can just see where he did this. So I reached out to him. He's also a Nigerian. So I asked if he didn't mind me talking about this and making reference to his channel. So this is what he made. So we're going to try and create similar things. Just might not be this, but just how to groom the hair in Cinema 4D with Ornatrix. All right, here. So if you look at what I have, I just have a background light. I have a plane which is serving as my background. I have a background light which is lighting only the background. So I excluded this character from this. So if you check the exclusion, I excluded the character bust and also the hair from there. I also have my left light, my right, and my top light. Then I have my geometry. Notice here that for my geometry, I have the hair hidden. The reason is because I'm only going to groom the hair on this hair geometry, so I don't really need it visible. But if I bring it on, this is what I have. So if I hide this is the hair that I have. So how I got this was just from this geometry. I just selected this geometry and select some parts that I wanted. Okay, so just holding down shift to paint over where you want. So I'm just being clumsy with this, so you don't have to be that clumsy. So once you have that, UF, do a field selection. So once you have this guy selected and you've refined your selection over here, just right click and split. But I'm not going to do that. So that's how I got this hair. And also another thing I did for the hair right here is that if you notice, I added a pattern here on one side. So the way I did this was just selecting the hair, go to this and just selecting some part of the hair where you want to have your pattern. So once you have it selected, just delete and go to point mode and start moving this point. So if I go to move to, I change from axis to normal. So that will allow me to move this point however I want it to go. Okay, so that's how I did that. So I'm going to undo this because I don't need that. So that's how I did that, pretty much. Nothing really fancy. So I'm going to go back to this. So let's look at the Ornatrix. So if you come to this Ornatrix, let me just throw this open so I have all of them. And the first thing you would think is that if you look at all the tools here, you would say to yourself that, wow, will I learn this? Like I said, I'm still learning this, and just take them one at a time. If you really understand the hair tool in Cinema 4D, you understand most of these things here. So the first thing you want to do is select the geometry you want to add the hair to, just like Cinema 4D hair tags. So once you have the geometry selected, you click on this add hair. So notice I have my 4, so you double click on the 4. It's going to bring up this over to this object. So I have this 4 and this geometry. Then if you notice the colorization of this 4, you have 2 different colors. You have a light blue color and also a dark blue color. So now for this light blue color, this one is meant for the guide, while this is the strand itself. All right. So let's look at this. If we click here, you have, it's going to give you 3 tools by default, 4 rather, 1, 2, 3, 4. You have your guide mesh, you have your edit guide, and so on and so forth. So let's look at the guide from mesh. So go to guide from mesh. The first thing you want to check right here is the distribution, how the air is being distributed. So by default, it's evenly distributed. So how you know this is just leave your mouse over for a while. You are going to have the tooltip. So the default method is evenly distribution. So if I hide this and bring this on, you notice. Then if I change from even distribution to by center face, this is center face center. It's going to put this at the center of each of these polygons. So if you hit NB, start seeing this. Notice this is not giving you a better representation because this is just guide. This is the actual strand. So this is giving you the right representation. So it's placed at the center point. It's just more like a cinema 4D here. So you can just check all this through and see how it works. So I'm going to go back to evenly distributed, NA, go back to shaded mode. Let me save this so that if I have any issue, I can continue where I stop. All right, so the other thing you also have is your count. So right now the count is for the guide counts. So how many counts do you have here? So this is not a better representation of the total here. So right now you have 300 guide here. I can start to reduce the guide till I don't have anything. 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth. You can even go overboard. So let's just go with the 300. So that's for that. And by the way, it's going to distribute this normal to that, to the faces. So that's very important and handy. Then the next one is the point count. So I'm going to talk about this point count by the time I'm adding in coils and all that. So for the guide length, that is more like the length of the hair. So if I bring this length down, you can start seeing that here. So let's try 3. I think this should do for us here. Then the next thing is the randomness. So the randomness is how this hair is distributed. So if you notice, some of them are smaller than others. So if I increase the randomness to 90, which is the highest, okay, 100 rather, you notice you have some very small, some long. So you can do that, or you don't want to have any randomness, so everything is of the same length. So but in this case, I think I will go with 30, 35 thereabout. Then this changes the seed. So this is self-explanatory. All right, so once you're done with this, I'm not going to be looking at all these tools. I'm just going to pick the ones I've tested and practiced with. So over time, I will be checking the other things. So once you're done with setting up the length of the hair, the count, and the randomness and all that, so you want to go to edit guide. So this edit guide is more like, for me, for now, it is more like the powerhouse of this plugin. Quote me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure. Like I said, for now, I'm still testing out this. The reason is because you have a lot to do here. So if you notice, if I scroll down, I don't really have much until I start picking any of this mode. So the first one is by root, this one is strand, and this is comb. So if you let go for a while, this is brush rather, this one is strand, and this is root. So this just tells you how you want to manipulate the hair. So if you want to manipulate the hair from the root directly, you can choose this root. As soon as I do this, notice we have more icons shown to us. If I go to strand, it gives me more things for strand, for me to work with strand. But as of now, I've only been working with this, which is the brush. So if I go to brush and I scroll down, I have different brush types. So you can also check this and play around with these different brush types. But the ones I have checked here is that I really work with is just this brush, and also this move brush, and also the cut brush. So then you have your coil or the rotate. This will coil that. If you go to coil, notice it starts coiling or rotate. And this works with more like your brush. In Cinema 4D, you have the size of the brush and you have the strength of the brush. So you notice the effect. All right, so let's go to what we want to do. So we'll go to cut. So for the cut, I can decide to say maybe I want to cut this. So let me save this. So I can come to this place here. Let me just hide the hair. I can just use this geometry to orbit. I can start cutting from this side, and I have this until I have that part. So let's say, for instance, this place I need to bring this down. I can bring this down even much more. And so that is just that. But then there is one tool that I would talk about that I don't want to really, let me just undo all these cuts that I've made. And so you see that's more. And that is the symmetry. So instead of me cutting these guys here and going to the other side and cutting, I can just put this guy, mirror this. And it is not called symmetry here, it is called mirror. So if you look down, there should be a brush mirror just under this. Then you have the way your brush is going to look like. You have by default the circular mode, undo. You have your rectangular mode. So if you just paint, undo that. Then you have your line mode. So the way this works is just, if I reduce this brush and click and drag, then let go, it's going to cut that, just trimming that part. You see that? Okay, so let me undo. I don't want that, so I'll come back. So let's look at this. So you just make use of all these different brush shapes. So if I go to my brush mirror axis, I can choose an axis. So if you look at here, I want to make this Z my axis. So I will change this to Z. So what that means is, I think Z is not the right one. I think it should be X rather, X. So I'll make it X. So that means whatever you do here affects the other one. So it's making use of the X axis. So what that means now, if I come here and I start painting here, it should affect the other one. Okay, if I do this here, that should affect that. If I come here and paint here and cut off those parts, it should also have that effect here. So you can see that. So have that effect going through. So that's how that is done. So let's cut this down a little bit. So while I'm cutting, I'm saving this file so it doesn't crash on me. Notice as I'm doing this back part is affecting this other one for me. So I can always just go and start doing this, and it will give me pretty much what I want. Okay, so once you are done grooming this part, cutting the things you want, then the next thing you want to do is to start doing other things and adding some modifiers to it. So let's brush this guy up. So I'm going to go back and change from cut to brush. I still have my symmetry. So if I brush this, I can start brushing this. So let's say, for instance, this guy, I want to bring this down. Put this down here. So right now, I don't want, what's it called? I don't want my symmetry because I need to start working on this individual part. So what I'm going to do is come to this place, turn off the symmetry. So none. So I can start brushing individual parts. So I can brush these parts coming towards the side and this coming down here. So maybe I will reduce this so that I can have this. So you can just start working with this and letting it go wherever you want it to go. So let's assume this should still come up and come out here. So you can actually work with this to give you the effect you're looking for. Control S. I hope this doesn't crash on me. Okay, like I said, it crashed on me, so thank God I saved this. So we can start, go over this again and start painting this. So like I did here, so let's assume I want this to come over here. And then possibly look at this, maybe this should come also here. I might need to Control S to save again. I might need to come to this size and reduce the size. Control S, so you need to be in that habit of always saving, so it's very important. So this is actually teaching me a lot. So let's assume this should come up and this one should come down. So if I would do this in with normal in Cinema 4D, I would have just done different selection and have different grooming. But this um, helps with that. Not that you can't do that also here, but it's just this is a lot simpler. Control S again. So you need to always do that. And the ear is somewhere here, so you don't want it to. So maybe this one should come down. Control S again. So maybe this should come. So I think this is fine like this. Possibly move this guy. So I don't want them to cover up this section. So I'll just do this for this. Okay, so you can decide to take long. Oh, this is going to crash again. Okay. All right, so I think I will just stop here so I don't bog down this stuff. So that is it for that. So once you are done with using your brush, just click on the brush, it deactivates from there. So I'm going to save this also. Then the next thing you want to do is to, because right now this is still strand, we need to convert this to a geometry, which is mesh. We cannot render this out right now, so we need to convert this guy to mesh. So let's bring this out. So for us to convert this to mesh, then we have mesh from strand. We already have our strand. So if I click mesh from strand, and that will come up. So the placement is very important. If your mesh from strand is here, you have all that information. You can see the difference between the placement of this mesh from strand. Okay, so if you make it just below the width, it's going to take the width, so it reads this from here down. Notice we've affected the width. So if I do this now, you notice how is it giving us this, and this is where that is. If I save this, we go over to the width, and this is more like half of the hair. So this is the width of the hair. That is why you're having this. So if we come to this and select this point, bring this point down. So this is more like the root and the tip. So you notice what is happening to the root here. So this is the root. If I bring the root up and bring it down, see the effect. So the mid of this, so we can just do this right here. So we will want to bring this down. So like I said again, I'm giving this credit to Genesis for checking out this tutorial, and that is what I'm using for this. So once you are done with this, the next thing you want to do is so really much for this place, this is just what you do here, changing the width. Then if you're changing the graph for the width, then you can come here and change the width yourself. So if you want to make this is more like the general width, but it's still making use of this graph if you look at it. So let's just bring this back to, let's say, 1.5. If it's not too wide, so let's try 1.2. So that's fine. So if you look at this hair looks so small. We don't really have enough hair here. And if you come to the strand, the geometry, so this is what is giving us that effect. So for this mesh, you can choose a particular style. So it's making use of this style. If you add this style, you have a more geometry. So this is not more like a flat plane anymore. It's more like it has depth. But for speed purpose and for your productivity, you want to work with this, so you don't really need too much because you're going to be far from it anyway, so you don't need that too many geometries. Okay, so then the other thing you want to do is coming back to the air from guide. If you look at the air from guide, we have render count. So this is where this and this comes in handy. So the guide count here is 300, while the render count is 10,000. So the render count is what you're going to be seeing after rendering. It's going to be 10,000. All right. So if you want to represent this and see what you get, you can just change this to 10,000 and see the effect you have. So this is going to give you that count here, but really you don't really need that. So you just bring this to 300. So what you actually need is this. And notice something, whatever you have done right now, as soon as you change this value, you would have to go back and retouch the hair. All right, so if I come here and change this to, let's say, 30,000, save. You notice you don't have any changes there, but if I go over to this and try and change this value with 1, I'll have to go back because the brush that we did and the cuts is recognized at this 300 count. So you want to leave this because you don't really need this. What you need actually for rendering is this one that you need to change right here. All right, so that's very, very important. So when you're working, you would want to change this, up this, but for here, let's just have it 10,000. So we have this. Then, like I said I'm going to come back to this point count. So the point count, if I look at one of these strands here, if I hit NB, you see the segment. That is the count that we're talking about here. So the point count here is 10. So that means we have 10 segments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 at the tip, somewhere there. So if you start increasing this count, you notice what is happening with this. So if I make this 30, for instance, notice we have enough count. And this is very important because of the next thing I'm going to do. So let's go with 10 to start with. So because of this next thing I am going to do, which is adding in coil, and you will start seeing that effects now. So if I add in a coil, the coil will be added, and this is what you get. You see everything looks so jagged and all that. You don't have smoothness to it. But if you come back to this and change to, let's say, 60, you start to see it becoming more coil. So let's go with 100, and also let's look at this coil. So if you look at the coil, you have two options. You have helix and spline. So I think this one is the spline or the sinusoidal wavy, and this is the coily helix. So this one is more like a 2D and this is a 3D. It goes more like, so this is the best option to choose really. Then the other thing you also want to look at is the axis you want to add the coil to. Y-axis, it changes. Notice what happens. Z-axis, it points up, and X-axis, notice what happens. So we change this to Z by default. It's giving us, because Z is normal to this. And the other thing you also want to check here is your magnitude and the phase. So the magnitude really is the size of the coil. That is what the magnitude is. Okay, so the size of your coil, that is what the magnitude is. So right now the coil is at 1. So if I make it 0, so that means we are not going to have any coil. Everything is just going to, the end point is going to be the same with the starting of the coil. But if I want to start increasing this, I can start changing this and see what we get to have. So I think for me, 1 is too much. I think so. So maybe I'm going to go with 0.5, or let's try 0.75. I think this is fine. Then the next one is the phase that you're going to change. So right now we have, the phase is number of turns, all right? So number of revolution you're going to have. So if I make this 0, notice the magnitude doesn't really have any effect because the magnitude will only work with your phase. So right now we don't have any turn. So that's why the magnitude is still the same thing. But if I add 1 ton, see what we get to have at the top. If I say I want to have 4 tons, you start seeing the effect of your coil, the magnitude. So here we can now start changing this back. So maybe we want this to be 0.5, and this should do for that. All right. So that's very important for you to grab that. So let's go with 2.5, and this is fine for me. And those short ones, you can see the effect you get to have. Okay, so that is pretty much it for the coil. So the next thing you are going to add here is the frizz. So the frizz is going to turn everything, like he said, like Genesis said in his words, it's going to make it messy. So this will, you know what the frizz will do, it will even intensify the coil and make some just go the way it should. So really, I'm mumbling. So if you make this 0, you notice you don't get to have any amount of. Then what you need here is we have the outliner, very important, and also the amount. So if I start increasing the amount, you notice the amount of the frizziness you have. So the default 20 for me is too much. So I think I will go with 5. When you're working with this, really try and be subtle as possible. You don't need too much values. So I think I'll go with this 4 or 3. Okay, then you now have the outliner. So the outliner is more like the one that goes out. You know, some air will just stick out of the group of air that you have on your head. So those ones are the outliner. So let me increase this so you see more of that. So the outliner amount, if I bring this to 0, you start seeing the effects. Notice that some are going up as I'm changing this. Can you see? Some are going up until see a few of them sticking out of the group. So I think I'm going to choose a value of 3 still, then go back to this and bring it back to 3.5 thereabouts. Just very small changes. So I think that is pretty much it. You can also change your add clumps to it and all that. So let's look at the settings. If I save this, let's look at the effect we get to have. So right now this is not the air here is too small. Okay, so let me zoom in closely again. The hair here is too small. So I'm trying to frame up this lady. So I think I'm done with this. I'll just close this. And let's try and bring up this. If I go to this end, interactive render, and notice by default, Ornatrix is going to give you a material for the air. So you notice that the count is too small. So we can barely see everything. So for us to solve that, what we're going to do is, let me save this again. What we're going to do is to go back to the hair from guide and start increasing this. So let's try 50. Stop this and re-render, and let's see what we get to have. So now I'm beginning to bug the system. So this is crying out that, Joe, don't kill me. So I can still go up. So let's try 80,000 and then render. And if this doesn't really look as I want, there is another thing I can go and do. Yeah, and that is so you can see the hair. So that is to go back to the width and change this width. So if we change this to 4 and render, that is to compensate for that. So it's going to make it wide, so you get to have this effect. So I think this might be too wide for my liking. What do you think? So let's stop this, and also let's bring this to 3 and go back to this air and make this 120. So I'm really bugging this. Then the fraction tells you the number that you're going to render. I think we should come back low. Let's try 40. The fraction is 10% of 40. That's what it's showing. So let's go 100%. So let me save this. Let's go 100% with 40,000. Let's see what we get to have. So let's wait for this to fire up. So it's having to calculate the total 40,000 hair count. So I think this is much. So that's why it's doing that. So really, if you look at the percentage of that, so if you say 10% of 40,000, so really it's just giving us 4,000, and that's why it's that small. All right. So now we're saying 100% of this 40,000. I hope this answers fast. So 100%. So that means we're really getting the 40,000 air count, which is really much. I wasn't looking at that, so I think I'll still have to go back and change the width because the width might be too much for that. So what I think I will do is to stop this and go back and do just that. So this is, my system is really crying out. All right, so what I'm going to do now is to change this value. So we'll go with 50% to start with. So I want to have a total of 10,000 here on him. So we'll go with 20,000. So that means I'm going to have a total of 10,000 here. So the next thing is to come in and change the width to somewhat 2 and save this. Then let's fire up this and see what we get to have. Okay, so I'm just going to fire and pause and if it will answer me fast. Okay, so this is really answering me, not that slow. So you have this here. So if you like that, I think I could still go with 30,000.
Thank you for coming back to my channel once again. This is Joseph from Jouleconcepts. Here I drop an in-depth tutorial about how to use
this 20,000 here. So I'm going to do that.
Things you would never have thought of.
And change that. So you get the idea.
If you're new to this channel, please subscribe for more tutorials. Also hit the bell icon in order to be notified every time I drop a new tutorial.
Try 20,000 here. And let's see that. So that's, by the way, let's just bring this down and talk about the material. So right now we have this material. I'm using Corona, so I'm going to create a Corona material. And the good thing with this Ornatrix is that you can use a normal material here on it. So just drag this over here to replace. So you can actually use a normal material. So for the normal material, I can decide to now come here and change the diffuse. So maybe I want to have a diffuse of 2, very black, and maybe not that black, maybe that black. Okay, let's try 4. Then I want to add a reflection to it, but I'm going to add a bit of glossiness to that reflection. So we're going to have this, something like that, and reduce this IOR. So this is pretty much what I need to do for the hair. So that is the hair. So let's try and render this. So if I check the setting again, So can we go with, so let's go with that and see, save this again and then fire up this. Okay, so you are seeing this. I think I should just reduce this. The fuse is too much, because if you look at this, I'm seeing, and also for the reflection, let's bring this down a little bit. Just a little bit of reflection to it. Don't want it to be too reflective. And then I think this should be fine. And let's stop and add more air. And I think I'm just going to stop here because this is just so if I make this 60, so that makes it 30,000. So let's fire up this. So I might need to zoom in like this and see what I get to have. So let's see what I have here. Okay, so this is really something here. So you can actually make it whatever kind of hair you want. Maybe you want the tip of the hair to be all this blonde hair and painted hair and sort of. So you can just come here. So let me just do that and stop the tutorial here. So I'm going to add in a gradient, I think. A gradient, okay. I think I would have a fall off instead of gradient. So the fall off will walk along the Z axis. So I'm making this 0 and the Z 1. And the reason is because I want it to go to the Z value of the object itself. So I'm going to have it moving from this brown, this brownish color to this, let's just play around with colorful designs and all that. So we can do this, bring this down here and add it with pink. So you have this. So I think this should work. So let's see the effect we get to have with this. Let's bring this down. So let's see if this will be fine. So that is what we have here. So let's just quickly fire up and see what we have. Okay, see, this is actually not giving me what I want. So I think I will just copy this out. Gradient. I'll copy this gradient out. Let me stop this for a moment and change it from that fall off to gradient. And paste this over here. So let's try and make this V so it goes up. So everything will go up into the plane. So we have that. So we can still squash this. So this is more like the hair, and the top is going to have that color. Okay, so I think I'll just do this and stop. I promise I'm stopping here. Okay, so you can start seeing what you get to have. So that is pretty much it. Just play around with this air and just check it and tell me what you feel about it. Ornatrix, that's the name. So if you feel this was helpful and you've learned something, please do give me a like and a thumbs up. If you feel it was intuitive, also give me a comment. And if you're new to my channel, please do subscribe because I do tutorials like this every time. So do have a wonderful day and God bless you. Bye.